So this is another supporting episode, installment, lecture, whatever you want to call it, for the series that I intend to do, which I've named in the playlist as Who Said It Better. And what I intend to do in this playlist is to cover passages in the Gospels and to pose to the viewer whether the words quoted are more plausibly or believably spoken by an itinerant Jewish rabbi named Jesus, Yeshua, whatever, or by a Roman general, later turned emperor, who made war with the Jews, exterminated Jewish women and children, laid siege to Jerusalem, breached Jerusalem's walls, and then laid siege to the temple, and eventually destroyed the temple in Jerusalem. So anyway, what I'm going to talk about right now is how Gentiles capitalized on some pretty mundane Jewish concepts from the Hebrew Tanakh, what Christians call the Old Testament, although the Old Testament comes from different sources. Let me just make sure that I'm using the word mundane correctly. So, lacking interest or excitement, dull, of this earthly world, rather than a heavenly or spiritual one. So these words that are used, if there's any place where you would expect them to be used in a supernatural way, it would be in the Hebrew scriptures. So if we find that these words are used in a very down-to-earth, not so supernatural, pretty easy to explain, routine, everyday way, then that should make us pause and consider whether maybe the way these words have been blown up, capitalized upon, embellished, I don't know, inflated, assigned more meaning than they actually had originally, that maybe this is the result of Gentile ignorance, or Gentile a general Gentile lack of skill in Hebrew. So the first word we'll start with is Satan. So this is Greek Strong's numbers 7852, 7853, 7854, and a related word is 7855. So I think the primary one that we're dealing with is 7854, because there aren't so many occurrences of 7853 or 7852. And I take that back. 7852 is actually a different word. So, but it's kind of related, as I'll try to demonstrate. So, we should understand that there was no capitalization in Hebrew that I'm aware of, especially in the Hebrew before or during the writing of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And it's also true that although we're not going to be even diving into any kind of Greek terms, it's also true that that's the way it was, I believe, with the, I don't know if it's Koine Greek or Kani Greek, I've heard it pronounced different ways, but the Greek of the Christian scriptures, they didn't even have spaces between their words in the Greek of the Christian scriptures, in the earliest manuscripts. So, and I don't believe they had capitalization either. When I learned the Hebrew alphabet, I didn't learn any capitalized forms of any of the letters. I did learn that there were final forms of some letters where if a letter happened at the end of the word, it would look different, and you would, the way you used it would be a little different, because maybe the vowel sound would lead into the consonantal sound rather than follow it, you know. So anyway, so our first word is Satan. Now, I really think that Muslims, when they refer to America as the Great Satan, and Israel as the Little Satan, and then they'll even call different people Satans, plural, while whether their opinion is warranted is a separate debate, and I don't even care about that. I certainly don't regard I would say that America's kind of lost its way, but I don't know that that makes America the great adversary of God, because you have individual Americans who I don't think are adversaries of God, and I don't think that being born an American turns you into an adversary of God. And I certainly don't believe that Israel is an adversary of God. The scriptures say exactly the opposite. If anything, the people that kill the children of Israel, they would be the adversaries of God. But the way that they use the word in their Semitic Arabic language is more faithful to the way it's used in the Hebrew Tanakh. And I think the way they pronounce it is shaitan, but in Hebrew it's Satan. And because this letter here, Sheen, I think that's a tet. Forgive me, I haven't brushed up on my alphabet lately, but I think that's a tet because it looks like a tea kettle. That's how I remember that one. And then there's a final noon there, so it's basically STN, right? And then these are the vowel pointings for the ah sounds. So anyway, the way the Hebrew scriptures uses this word, here this is the verb form of the word. So let's go back to the noun, and here the way the word is used, the primary definition is an adversary, one who withstands, And it says, or an adversary in general, personal, or national. So a nation could be your adversary. Just like we would say that, like Ukraine would say Russia is its enemy. It's the same word, enemy, adversary. And then here the second definition is a superhuman adversary. And then it even capitalizes the S and says Satan, as in like Satan the devil. So what does it say here about this? It says an opponent, especially with the article prefixed, capitalized Satan. So what it's saying there is if it says Ha-Satan, they're asserting that means Satan the devil. And then it says that he is the archenemy of good. And then it even admits that the verb form might be to withstand, or at least that's, I guess, one of the ways that this word is translated in a verb form. So here again, the Strong's says the first definition is as a masculine noun, meaning adversary. Second, as a capitalized proper name. Note that in 1st Enoch, from the Dead Sea Scrolls, and also it was also found in, I'm not sure if it's Egyptian Coptic or the Ethiopic, before it was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. But there, I think, there's a particular angel, and you get the impression that maybe he's Satan. And I think he's called Satanel, as in like the adversary of El, the creator. Anyway, and here it points out how Hebrew, Aramaic, Syriac, Aramaic, Arabic, they all, I guess, have this word in it. So anyway, the Zoroastrians in Persia, they had a concept of a prince of light and a prince of darkness, right? So they had this strong dualistic religion of good and evil, or light and darkness. And even the Dead Sea Scrolls talk about the sons of light and the sons of darkness. So, and that would have been centuries after any kind of Jewish exposure to, Persian culture. I think this idea of this personage called Satan is something that came later on. You don't read about it much in the Torah, and there was even kind of an apologetic article published by the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society about Satan and how basically like I think it was saying that Christianity, the advent of Christianity is what provided the revelation about Satan, that Satan was somehow kind of a secret the whole time, and it wasn't until Christianity came along that people really got the straight scoop about this secret supernatural evil personage named Satan. I think that's garbage. I think that's apologetics. Let's see. So, reading further, an adversary, as in war, an enemy, like, for example, in a court of justice. Also, whoever opposes himself to another is considered a Satan. And it says, and then with the article, the ha, so you got Ha-Satan, it assumes the nature of a proper name, And is Satan capitalized again? There's no capital in the word. The devil. And it describes him as the evil genius in the later theology of the Jews. The later theology. So that right there admits that Satan the devil was not something found in earlier Jewish theology. And then the editor in brackets puts rather in the true revelation of God from the beginning. So he's saying that no, actually, Satan was always known about in the Jewish religion. You know, that's, I'm sure, a Christian apologist there. And it says that this Satan the devil seduces men and accuses them and calumniates them before God. Calumniates them? I'm not sure how that's pronounced. But I know that calumny means like basically talking crap about somebody. So here it says, it is a groundless opinion of Albert Schulten's Herder and Eichhorn that Satan in the book of Job is different from the Satan of the other books and is a good angel employed to examine into the manners of men, and on this account whenever in the early part of this book he is mentioned, they would read such and such. This notion has now been rejected by all interpreters, and part of that reason is because in Judaism now, Satan is just considered an agent of the Creator, and I'll try to show you why I think this is the case, and and I'm sure someone will have an argument against this opinion, and maybe I'm not drawing from enough sources to really prove this, but this goes back to Isaiah chapter 45, and it's talking about how the Creator uses Cyrus the Great of Persia. And here in verse 1, it refers to Cyrus as the Creator's anointed, and the word there is the same as translated Messiah in other places. So really Isaiah is referring to Cyrus, a Gentile, as Messiah. And but we'll talk more about that later. But I want to go on in this passage that the Creator here through the prophet Isaiah says, I form the light. Oh wait, first it's important that we read in verse 5, I am, and that's the tetragrammaton there, and there is none else, there is no God beside me. So he's got no deputy, he's got no Son of God next to him, it's just him. I girded thee, I should be reading this in a better modern translation, though thou hast not known me, that they may know from the rising of the sun and from the west that there is none beside me. I am the Creator, and there is none else. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Creator, the tetragrammaton there, the divine name, Yud, He, Vav, He, I do all these things. So that's why I'm guessing Judaism sees Satan as just an agent of the Creator, and really not such a powerful being with so much authority to do much evil, especially to the children of Israel, who are the Creator's special possession. But just to make sure that we're getting a good translation of this. We could use the New King James Version. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create calamity. I, the Lord, do all these things. So there it doesn't say evil. It's translated calamity. Let's see. We really should use a literal translation here. I'm not sure if the NIV is literal or not, but I think the Revised Standard Version is. I form light and create darkness. I make weal and create woe. I am the Lord who do all these things. ASV, I'm not sure who that is. I form light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I am the Creator that doeth all these things. Young's Living Translation, I think. Forming light and preparing darkness, making peace and preparing evil. I am the Creator doing all these things. Is that Darby? Yeah. Forming the light and this was Young's, literal translation. Okay, not living. Darby, forming the light and creating darkness, making peace and creating evil. So what I think this is doing is that when the children of Israel they were exposed to this Persian Zoroastrianism and its dualistic thinking, here instead the Creator says, yeah, you've got these dualistic elements that exist in the world, these extremes, these poles, but I'm here to tell you that there is no son of darkness or prince of darkness who stands next to me, that both the good and the bad come from me, and it's just me. So I think this message is to help them know that to not get confused by the Persian Zoroastrianism that Cyrus the Great of Persia might have subscribed to. Nevertheless, whether he was a Zoroastrian or not, Cyrus or Koresh, he was instrumental in a messianic way in liberating the Jews from the Babylonian captivity, giving them leave to return to their homeland, and then giving them permission to begin rebuilding the temple. And so that he's a type, if you must, of what the Messiah to come would do. So, and we can actually touch on that a bit more near the end about what a true Messiah is supposed to do. So, getting back to this, I want to show you how this word is used, Satan. Numbers 22:22, but God's anger is kindled because he went. I think this is referring to Balaam, the false prophet, Balaam. Let me just blow it up. Yeah, Balaam. So, and the angel of the Lord, now Christians will tell you the angel of the Lord, that always refers to Jesus. That's what they believe, you know. Every time they see angel of the Lord, oh, that must be Jesus. Never mind that they also believe that the Lord, even the Lord capital L-O-R-D, the Tetragrammaton, they believe that's Jesus too. But then the angel of the Lord is also Jesus. So like Jesus has a deputy Jesus that he sends out, I guess. It doesn't have to make sense. It's kind of like Democrat ideology. It doesn't have to make any sense. As long as you do enough virtue signaling, you're good, man. Don't worry about it. So the angel of the Lord took his stand in the way as his adversary. Okay, so now this passage is saying that the angel of the Lord took his stand in the way as his Satan. So the angel of the Lord served as a Satan in this situation. Then in same chapter, verse 32, and the angel of the Lord said to him, "Why have you struck your ass these 3 times?" Meaning, his burro, his donkey, whatever. "Why have you struck your ass these 3 times? Behold, I have come forth to withstand you, because your way is perverse before me." And that word withstand, I'm guessing, is like a verb form of Satan. So the angel of the Lord saying, I've come forth to be a Satan to you. 1 Samuel chapter 29 verse 4. But the commanders of the Philistines were angry with him, and the commanders of the Philistines said to him, "Send the man back, that he may return to the place to which you have assigned him. He shall not go down with us to battle, lest in the battle he become a Satan to us, an adversary to us. For how could this fellow reconcile himself to his Lord? Would it not be with the heads of the men here?" But David said, "What have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah, that you should this day be as a Satan to me? Shall anyone be put to death in Israel this day? For do I not know that I am this day king over Israel?" So see, these passages have nothing to do with Satan the devil, some spiritual figure with horns or without horns, red or white or whatever color, a spiky tail with or without, cloven hooves with or without, whether you get into all that imagery or not, these passages have nothing to do with the Christian Satan the devil. It's like Waterboy says, "Oh, Mom, you think everything's of the devil." Well, clearly not every occurrence of the word Satan in the Hebrew scriptures is about Satan the devil. 1 Kings chapter 5 verse 4, "But now the Lord my God has given me rest on every side. There is neither adversary nor misfortune." So there's neither Satan nor misfortune. 1 Kings chapter 11 verse 14, "And the Lord, the Creator, raised up an adversary against Solomon." So he raised up a Satan against Solomon, Hadad the Edomite. Okay, so Hadad the Edomite is a human man, but you're saying Hadad the Edomite is Satan the devil? He was of the royal house in Edom, so now you're saying that Satan is descended from the Edomites? You see how ridiculous this is? So it's later on and then here, Satan stood up against Israel and cited David to number Israel. That's probably just referring to like national enemies who stood up against Israel. We can even look at the passage. I'm just guessing here. When you gain some experience with the scriptures and you actually look into the terminology, you can pretty much just guess sometimes what some of these things mean, and you're going to be right on the money because you've familiarized yourself enough with the actual original languages of the scriptures. But let's look at it. So so David said to Joab and the commanders of the army, "Go number Israel and bring me a report that I may know their number." But why then and see, I guess there was a commandment against numbering Israel, so Joab is like, do we really want to do this? But the king's word prevailed against Joab, so Joab departed and went throughout all Israel and came back to Jerusalem. And he gave the sum of the numbering of the people to David. In all Israel there were 1,100,000 men who drew the sword, and in Judah 470,000 who drew the sword. But he did not include the tribes of Levi and Benjamin in the numbering, for the king's command was abhorrent to Joab, because I believe it's against the Torah to do that. I could be wrong. But it says that the Creator was displeased with this thing, and he smote Israel. And then David basically repented for having done it. So maybe we need to go like one chapter back and say chapter 20, go up here in the URL and change the chapter to 20. And there we are, war with Philistine giants. So what is the last verse? It says, and when he taunted Israel, Jonathan the son of Shemaiah, David's brother, slew him. There was war again at Gath, where there was a man of great stature, had 6 fingers on each hand. So that that must be Goliath, or Goliath, the Gittite. Anyway, so, or maybe this is a different guy. I don't know. It says, because it says Jonathan, David's brother, slew him. Anyway, then in the next verse it says these were descended from the giants in Gath, and they fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants. So this is talking about earthly warfare, human warfare, in chapter 20, verse 8. And then if you go to the next chapter, the very next verse says, Satan stood up against Israel and incited David to number Israel. So I think that's really referring to an earthly adversary, a national, like they could have said the enemy stood up against Israel. But I mean, let's look at it. No, it just says Satan here. It doesn't say Ha Satan, right? So keeping with those Christian rules, right, this should say Ha Satan if this is referring to Satan the devil, but instead it just says Satan. So they're breaking their own rules, of exegesis, translation, whatever you want to call it. And this, I think from the contents it's clear that this is not referring to a Satan the devil. So I don't know how far I've gone into this. Okay, I can kill this. So oh, did I? No. Okay. So, but then in Job, in the book of Job, then I think we really do begin to see a figure who is like named Satan. But you know what? It's been a while since I've read Job. Maybe I should read it again and see if maybe the whole book could actually be translated the way it's translated through the rest of the Tanakh. But I'm just gonna give the book the benefit of the doubt, because it is a later book in the Tanakh, and give it the benefit of the doubt that maybe by then this kind of literature with this kind of spiritual personage was accepted amongst the Israelites. I don't know. I do know that Jews today, they'll acknowledge the existence of Satan, and I think they'll refer to Nehushtan. like some kind of serpent or something like that. Maybe the one from the Garden of Eden, I forget. But they believe that Satan exists, but you know what? You will rarely hear an Orthodox Jew talk about Satan. It's just not a big deal to them. And I think that this shows that this word Satan is a very mundane word. It's like the way we use the word enemy. So, if we skip over to Strong's Hebrew number 7853, if you'll look at the characters here, Shin, Tet, Nun, and then Shin, Tet, Nun, you see that it's spelled the same way in the consonants, and that's really the only thing that matters there. The vowel pointings came later. So the word is spelled the same, although they're two different Strong's Concordance numbers. And in fact, you know what, that brings up another word I should have included in this. But so here, Satan is a verb, and it means to be or act as an adversary, resist, or oppose. Says a primitive root to attack, figuratively accuse, be an adversary, or resist. And then, it's got a number of occurrences here. Psalms 38:20, those who render me evil for good are my adversaries because I follow after good. So, those who render me evil for good are my Satans because I follow after good. May my accusers, may my Satans be put to shame and consumed. With scorn and disgrace may they be covered who seek my hurt. And then, I don't need to go through every verse because you can always go to the Blue Letter Bible yourself and check this out yourself. I'm showing you how to do it. And this is how you should study any word you have a question about in either the Hebrew Tanakh or the Christian Greek scriptures. And if you just heard me say something that makes me sound like one of Jay's witnesses, like I'm with the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, yes, I have used the New World Translation in the past, and yes, I agree that the so-called New Testament could also be called the Christian Greek Scriptures. They're Greek, and they're Christian, and they're scriptures, at least to Christians. So it's a perfectly fine way to refer to them. Personally, I refer to the New Testament as the Christian addendum because it's something that Christians tacked on to the Hebrew Scriptures, and they presume to use it to interpret the Hebrew Scriptures. So it's an addendum that came from the Christians. So let's kill both of these, and then 7852, here the word is satam with a mem, final mem at the end, and it's a verb, and it means to hate, oppose oneself to, bear a grudge, retain animosity against, cherish animosity against, to lurk for, to to persecute, to hate, to oppose against. So this is almost like, you might say, satanic behavior, and that's just going from the final noon letter to the final mem letter. Just a one letter difference, and it provides a little bit of a tweak in the meaning, but it's pretty faithful to the concept of Satan. Then, if you go in the other direction to Strong's 7855, you've got Sitna. And I don't know if it's related, but in in Islam, they have a concept of something called fitna, which I think is deception. But here in Hebrew, this is sitna, and it has the shin, tet, nun, but then it adds a hey at the end. And this is accusation or enmity, meaning hatred. So this is almost satanic behavior. So that's Satan covered. You can check it out yourself. Please check out every occurrence of every form of the word Satan in Hebrew, Satan, and see how it's used. And I think you'll see that things aren't so supernatural as Christianity would have you believe. So Christianity, while they didn't have they didn't capitalize the first letter of the word Satan, and they didn't do that in the Greek translation of the word either. In the English translation, we see that they do capitalize the word because they consider it a proper name. So they've taken a mundane concept and, at their convenience and according to their own biases and prejudices, they translate that word to their own convenience, to their own advantage, rather than letting the context and the text reveal what the word is supposed to mean. So now the next word is another word that gets blown up in Christianity, and that's Mashiach. And that's typically translated Messiah, and in English often with a capital M at the beginning, unless they're referring to false messiahs, in which case they'll usually use a lowercase m. No explanation given. Or if they're referring to the anti-Messiah, if they're a messianic, they may call it the anti-Messiah instead of the Antichrist. They may use a capital M there. I think I've seen that. But then again, they may not. They may use a lowercase m. So, but what does this word mean? It's translated anointed 37 times, and Messiah, capitalized with an M, only twice. So clearly the more accurate translation is just the anointed. Of course, well, what does that mean to be anointed? Yes, it could mean that they're a Messiah. In the typical understanding of the term, but understand that when they've capitalized on this mundane concept and turned it into an eschatological, overblown concept that they've capitalized with a capital M, that word is going to carry some Hellenistic eschatological baggage with it. But how does the Hebrew Scriptures use the term? That's what we should be asking ourselves if we really want to understand what the word means. So, it says that this means anointed, usually a consecrated person, as a king, probably an Israelite king, a priest, probably an Israelite priest, or saint. And I'm not so sure about the saint part, but anyway, a saint in Christianity would be the translation of a kadoshim, I think, or maybe a tzaddik, a righteous one in Hebrew. No, I think it's kadoshim, because saint, I think, means holy one, and a holy one is a translation from kadoshim, or which would be the plural holy ones. I'm not sure what the singular of kadoshim is. Anyway, and I may be putting the stress in the wrong place on the word. I frequently do that in languages where I haven't personally and frequently heard how the word should be pronounced. I'll often put the stress in the wrong place. So I might be doing that here. Anyway, and then it says specifically the Messiah. So if it says the Messiah, it would have to say Ha Mashiach. And that's how Messianics often refer to Yeshua. They call him Yeshua HaMashiach, because they, instead of Jesus the Christ being the Greek, I guess, for anointed, they say instead Yeshua HaMashiach, because they're trying to slap a Jewish flavor on it and make it more appealing to Jews. There's no early Hebrew manuscript from which all the Greek manuscripts came that calls him Yeshua HaMashiach. Our earliest manuscripts are Greek. There may have been Hebrew translations from the Greek that existed, but we don't have any existing Hebrew manuscript that we can point to say this is where the Greek manuscript was translated from as regards the Christian Gospels, right? So please, if you're just trying to put a Jewish spin on it, never mind that the Jewish community never corporately accepted Jesus as the Messiah. And heaven forbid that we should give Jews the benefit of the doubt that maybe they had a reason they didn't. No, we just assume that Jews are spiritually blind, and that because we have been told that we received the Holy Spirit, that we know everything better than Jews do, even though we can't even read the original manuscript in Hebrew the way a Jewish 5-year-old can. That's the audacity that you inherit when you become a Christian, is because the Jewish people are now the other. You assume that in your little Christian echo chamber that everything you're saying, everything you're thinking, everything you're believing is right, and that if the Jews don't say, think, or believe the same things you do, that they must be wrong and thus of the devil. You never consider that maybe, being that your system of belief came later, that maybe your system of belief is the perversion, the counterfeit, because the counterfeit always comes after the original, not before. That maybe your religion might be the counterfeit, and that you might be the one who's in the wrong. So, anyways, so here are some passages. If the anointed priest, that's the high priest. That the anointed there, the Mashiach, that's not the Messiah. That's not an eschatological Messiah. That's the high priest. Again, anointed priest, that's the high priest. The priest from among Aaron's sons who is anointed to succeed him. You know, so you're going to see a lot of occurrences of the use of this word in a very non-messianic way, according to the typical Christian idea of messianic. But we can go to, here's a good one, 1 Samuel 26:9. But David said to Abishai, "Do not destroy him, for who can put forth his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless?" I think this is David talking about King Saul. So he was saying that King Saul, who is pictured as being kind of off God's program at that point, David is still referring to him as Mashiach, the Lord's anointed, because Saul was king. So Israelite kings are called Mashiach. Israelite high priests are called Mashiach. And that's, mind you, every Israelite king that right on down the line all the way up to the 1st century, right? Although I think kingship in Israel, was terminated a bit before that, right? High priesthood, I believe there was a high priest in Israel all the way up to the destruction of the temple, I think. Now, I think it's debated whether those high priests were legitimate high priests, maybe, I don't know. But the point is, there were so many people who were called Mashiach, and it was never seen as some supernatural end times kind of thing. It was just the regular order of business, in Israelite culture. But a passage that does stand out as very unusual would be, I passed it, Isaiah chapter 45 verse 1, which I already pointed to, where Cyrus the Great of Persia, a Gentile, is referred to by the prophet Isaiah. Is anybody here questioning whether Isaiah was a prophet or not? Really? Isaiah of all people? Isaiah referred to Cyrus as the Creator's anointed, his Mashiach. And really, Cyrus was just a man for the time, He was used because he could be used, and evidently he had a heart that seems to have been open to being used, and he must have been sympathetic, and I'm sure that the Creator was using him as a tool against the Babylonians who had the Jewish people captive, in order to liberate them, because the time of their exile was over. So again, we see there is one here where it talks about Messiah the leader, and I kind of wonder if that's also talking about Cyrus in Daniel. It's sometimes translated, I think in the New World Translation, as Messiah the leader. Where is that? Should be in Daniel, right? Oh, yeah, here. To the coming of an anointed one, a prince. And anyway, they translate it Messiah the leader. I don't know if that's accurate or not. Probably not. So all throughout these scriptures, it's referring to human beings. It's certainly not referring to a son, S-O-N, God. So, and then we have another word here, Mashach. So, you'll see that we have Mem, Shin, Yud. Oh my gosh. Is it Het? I may have got that wrong, and I apologize. Or final Het or final Chaf? I don't know. I'm sorry. It's been a while since I've brushed up. So, but then here we just have Mem, Shin, final Chaf, I guess. And maybe that's a Het. Anyway, they both make the same sound as far as I know, but in this one, the Yud is dropped. Now the Yud is kind of considered a divine letter. It's very tiny. It's really very much like Yoda in Star Wars. You know, he's a little thing, but he's very powerful. He's just filled with wisdom, and he's good through and through. And but if you drop the Yud from the word, then what happens? Draw, prolonged, scattered, draw long, draw away, continue, deferred, and drag. Like the first passage of it says, then Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver, and they took Joseph to Egypt. So I think it's drew Joseph up, maybe. I can check that right now. So pulled him up, Mashach. Yeah, so they pulled him up, and it's Mashach. So if you drop the Yud, then this word, you know, kind of loses its any sort of, you know, spirituality to it. So we'll move on. Now another one is is Malach or Malach. No, I think it's Malach. Hard K sound at the end, because Melech is a king. And so this word, typically or often translated angel, as we see here, and as angel here 111 times, messenger 98 times, ambassadors 4 times. So it's primarily being translated angel, but I submit to you that this word really means messenger, and a human messenger, and very rarely a heavenly messenger, unless it's, you know, again, maybe in the case of the angel of the Lord, the angel of the Creator. But the reason I object to the translation using the word angel, and it's pretty funny, because I think even, was it Rashi? I think it was Rashi in his commentary, where it mentions an angel, and then he says a literal angel. It's so circular, right? Because the word in Greek, angel, is a word that comes from Greek, and it's the same root that is found in the in evangelism, right? I think Ev might be good. I could be wrong in Greek, and then angel is the message. So it's like good newsism. Evangelism is good newsism. I could be wrong about the Ev. I'm not going to bother to check it because I'm not worried about it right now. But angel in Greek means messenger. It doesn't mean like a winged glowing being. It just means messenger. To translate it or rather transliterate it into English, because if you're carrying a Greek word that looks and sounds like angel and you're bringing that sound into English, that's transliteration, right? If you were translating angel, you would just say messenger in English. So all those places in the Greek, Christian Greek scriptures where it says angel, if they were faithfully translating it, they would just say messenger, because there's no harm in saying the messenger of the Lord. And it actually carries more meaning, because you're describing what the thing is there for. It's to deliver a message, right? It has a job, it has a purpose. If you say angel, well then, you know what, it might be like Roma Downey's little TV show, Touched by an Angel, where when the person finally realizes that the person is an angel, they say, I'm an angel sent by God, come to tell you that God loves you. And that's the watered down message that they would deliver in that TV show. You know, nothing specific, just, hey, you know, dumbass, the Creator loves you. Oh, well, gee, thank you very much. I needed a heavenly being to come and tell me that. You know, I was that down in my dumps that's the message that I really needed to hear, right? And we really needed to tie up one of our angels in heaven to come tell you that, even though you've got something called the Bible that tells you that. So, whatever. The point is, what this word means is messenger, and we can look at the passages. So Genesis 16, the angel of the Lord, or the messenger of the Lord, found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. And I will let you know something, if you will, instead of saying angel, if you will instead say messenger every time you say this word or see this word, you will arrive at some very different readings of some passages that you have kind of taken at Christian face value, because the way they've translated this word. Let's see. Genesis 19, the two angels came to Sodom, or the two messengers came to Sodom in the evening. And when Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed himself with his face to the earth. Now understand that in the ancient world, not only would you show, you know, hospitality to strangers and foreigners, but a messenger could actually be the representative of a ruler, and carry with him the same authority to speak and maybe even act in the authority of that ruler. So whereas in the movie 300, the Spartan says, "This is Sparta," and he kicks the messenger down the well, you'll remember what was said. The messenger said, "This is an outrage," because they were insulting a messenger sent by a ruler as just something you didn't do, right? Because you're basically touching the eyeball of that ruler if you do something to his messenger. You're insulting him by I wanted to say the word molest, but you know that's got different connotations these days. But you know, if you do something bad to a ruler's messenger, you're basically doing it to the ruler himself. So it takes some real guts or nuts to do that. Um, um, so here, when morning dawned, the messengers urged Lot, saying, "Arise, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of the city." So there's a message. Let's see. And he dreamed that there was a ladder set up on earth, and the top of it reached to heaven, and behold, the messengers of God were ascending and descending on it. Why? Because they had messages to deliver and to receive. Here we go. Genesis chapter 32, verse 6. And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, "We came to your brother Esau, and he is coming to meet you, and 400 men with him." So that's the same word that's being translated angels in other passages. So when, I think it was Rashi who said regarding the mention of angel that it was a literal angel, that's circular, because that's coming from the Greek word angel, which by that point had a lot of Christian baggage with it. You know, it wasn't just strictly a messenger, because if it said in the text that a messenger came, then Rashi wouldn't need to say a literal messenger, you know, because yeah, we got that already. It's a messenger. But instead he's saying a literal angel, but Rashi, and I know a lot of Jews rankle at this, but sometimes Rashi really strikes me like a churchman posing as a Jew. He says some really strange stuff that just doesn't seem to fit. Maimonides, however, yeah, Maimonides does seem to have a little bit of a, what's the word? Maybe he was exposed to a little bit of Arabic thinking, maybe, but Maimonides does not strike me as someone who was influenced by Christianity very much. Rashi, coming out of France, was it? He says some really Christian stuff sometimes, if you ask me. So, and, you know, my apologies to any Jews that I offend when I say that, but that's just my outsider's perspective. Someone who's really trying to get to the truth of the matter. Anyway, so if you look at these passages, you'll see that by and large you can translate these as messenger, and by the additional words tacked on or by the context, you'll be able to tell whether it's talking about a heavenly messenger or an earthly messenger. But whether it's heavenly or earthly, does it really matter? You know, you should be able to tell from the context. Do you really need to tack on these additional words? So Malak, and then here we have, if we go to the top again, Mem, Lamed, Aleph, and I don't know if that's final Chaf or Chet, or again, I'm sorry, I need to brush up on my alphabet. So if we go back and forth, you see the consonants are the same. Only one of the vowel pointings is different. It's the same word in Hebrew, you know, yet it has 2 different Strong's Concordance numbers. I think that's really misleading, and it's the Strong's that does that. like some of the lexicons, they don't do that because they're just using the same word for their entry. Anyway, here, malak, from an unused root meaning to dispatch as a deputy, a messenger. It says here specifically of God, that is an angel, also a prophet, priest, or teacher, ambassador, angel, king, messenger. To even use the word angel in this entry, it's circular. You know, it's like, oh, we need this Greek word to explain, with its Christian baggage, to explain to us what this Hebrew word means. Come on, be serious. So, and then here's 4398. Here it just says malak, Aramaic, corresponding to the Hebrew 4397, and angel. There's that Christian baggage word, and then there's just a couple entries here. Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants. Well, translate that messenger there, and then read the story every time it says angel. See what you come up with. Then here, Daniel says, my God sent his messenger and shut the lions' mouths. So, again, this is another mundane term. It's a messenger, not a feathery, winged, glowing being necessarily, unless the context, says that it's a messenger from heaven, in which case maybe it's feathery, maybe it's winged, maybe it's glowing. We just don't know, especially when the passage doesn't tell us what that messenger even looked like. But then when you get this culture, the Christian culture, that capitalizes these concepts, inflates them, blows them up, turns them into supernatural whiz-bang, concepts, and then you return to the Hebrew Scriptures. Well, now you're looking at the Hebrew Scriptures with all this Christian baggage, and you start thinking of it while being influenced by this Christian religion that has nothing to do with the Hebrew Tanakh. You're allowing something that came later to interpret what came before, when you should instead interpret what came later by what came before it. And if you find that what came later contradicts what came before, well, then maybe what came later is wrong and should be tossed out. And then what's kind of interesting is that then you add a hey at the end, and then it means work, business, workman, workmanship, goods, cattle, stuff, things, occupation, work, business. So then it's like the word for messenger with a hey at the end takes on the meaning of occupation and work, which really kind of makes you think that really, hey, that word really does mean messenger and not feathery, glowing, winged being. So now the next one is Yeshua in Hebrew, or Yeshua. And this is typically translated salvation, help, deliverance, health, save, saving, welfare, salvation or deliverance. And messianics like seeing this word, and I've been guilty of it too, seeing in this word as a word that could be taken as a messianic prophecy or proof text for Yeshua of Nazareth. In other words, Jesus the Nazarene. In modern mistaken parlance. And anyway, again, this is a very mundane concept. I prefer to translate this word sometimes as rescue, because I think rescue describes the word in a way that's more accurate to modern English speakers. Deliverance, people think about, a bunch of rednecks in the woods, engaging in sodomy. Salvation has got all this Christian baggage that, if you just confess Jesus, you'll be saved. And it's like, saved from what exactly? Well, you'll be saved from your sins. Oh, you mean the sins that only exist because the Creator instituted a bunch of commandments, and that if I break those commandments, that's a sin? So the Creator... So then did sin originate from the Creator? That's almost a Pauline question, right? Heaven forbid. May that never be. So it's like, I'm being saved by doing something. I'm being saved from the thing that's like caused because the Creator did something before that. And then, of course, I did something that was against what the Creator did. So, anyway, but I'm not going to go into Christian soteriology right now. But the point is, it often gets translated salvation, and it doesn't really carry the meaning the way it should. I think rescue is much better. But so Genesis chapter 49 verse 18, I wait for your rescue, O Creator. And Moses said to the people, fear not, stand firm and see the rescue of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. Of course, that's before the dividing of the Sea of Reeds or the Red Sea, whichever is the case. And the Lord is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation, or he's become my rescue. This is my God, and I will praise him, my father's God, and I will exalt him. Hannah, who was barren, my heart exults in the Creator, my strength is exalted in the Lord, the Creator. My mouth derides my enemies because I rejoice in your rescue. Because she was rescued from this situation of shame where she couldn't have a child. So it goes on, but again, this is a mundane word that is blown up into a big concept by Gentiles. And then if we go one number earlier, Hebrew 3:443, this is actually how Messianics spell Yeshua. Jesus, Jesus in Hebrew. And it was actually the name of an exilic priest, a priest in the exile of the Jewish people, who returned with Zerubbabel. Now what's interesting is that this Yeshua was more of a Messiah than the Christian Yeshua was. How is that? How can I say that? Well, even though he's got one lone verse in the whole Hebrew Tanakh, unless there's a different form of his name somewhere that I missed, it says that then Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, the son of Jozadak, arose and began to rebuild the house of God, in other words the temple, which is in Jerusalem, and with them were the prophets of God helping them. So whereas the Messianic, or the Yeshua of the Messianics that exist today, Whereas he either A, prophesied the destruction of the temple, and or B, actually participated in the destruction of the temple, given that Jesus is a literary mask or disguise for Titus Flavius, who destroyed the temple. Then we see here that this guy, who's only got one verse in the whole Hebrew Tanakh, was honored in that because he began to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. And that's one of the requirements of the Messiah according to Maimonides. and that's fitting the type provided by Cyrus the Great of Persia, who was, by the prophet Isaiah, by name referred to as Messiah, whereas Jesus certainly is not referred to as the Messiah by name by the prophet Isaiah. So that's kind of like a slap in the face to the Christian Messiah, if you ask me. It's like the creator who authored the Hebrew Tanakh just slapped your Messiah in the face. So, and then the next word is Yeshach, and that means casting down, which is, you change one little letter and then it takes on a completely different meaning, and it means emptiness of stomach. Har, in other words, hunger, apparently. So, there is another word we can go over, and that is Saul. Come on, where did it go? Here it is. Hebrew 7586. Okay, so who is Saul? Saul is of Benjamin and the first king of Israel. Kind of important, right? In that respect, right? A prototypical king of Israel and a definite Messiah, according to the use of the word Mashiach by none other than King David, if not elsewhere, right? And I'm sure there are other passages. But there's another Saul, isn't there? There's Saul in the Christian scriptures. But this is only referring to the Saul in the Hebrew scriptures. But let's be reminded that we do have another Saul in the Christian scriptures, because this is important. It's important to see this. And here, but Saul, who is also called Paul, and I think that was yeah, that's verse 9, 2 verses after verse 7, that mentions the proconsul, Roman proconsul Sergius Paulus. And anyway, Saul is called Saul up until the mention of Sergius Paulus, and then in verse 9 it says, but Saul, who is also called Paul, and then after them, or after that, Saul is called Paul, except when it describes this road to Damascus vision or encounter that Saul of Tarsus is supposed to have had, or where it mentions King Saul in Acts chapter 13 verse 21. So, but otherwise, from that point on, Saul is called Paul. Isn't that kind of weird to you? But anyway, where did I see this first? Well, Robert Eisenman, and probably in James the Brother of Jesus, or his book, The New Testament Code. I believe he was the one that pointed this out, and it's just damned peculiar. Because it doesn't happen in the text where Saul is supposed to have any kind of conversion experience. It just happens all of a sudden in the text where this person, this Roman Sergius Paulus, is mentioned. So anyway, yeah. Now, who is this Christian Saul? Well, this is supposedly the 13th apostle. This is supposedly the apostle to the Gentiles. This is a guy who, according to the Ebionites, was a false apostle. And not just according to the Ebionites, but also people who were living at the time the book of Acts was written, at least. Paul had the reputation of being someone who taught against the Torah. He taught against the commandments given by the Creator to the children of Israel. What does the Torah say should be done to a man who does that? Or to an Israelite who does that? Now supposedly this Saul is of the house of Benjamin, and he's supposedly a Pharisee of the Pharisees, whatever that's supposed to mean, and but the Ebionites, they didn't accept him as a true apostle. And so you kind of have to ask yourself, why? Well, if we look in the Hebrew, we have King Saul here, right? And over and over, it's referring to the first king of Israel, and the king of Edom, son of Simeon, and a Levite. They were all named Shaul. But look what happens. Let's see, I'm not sure which direction I'll have to go, but let me copy this. And let's try going in this direction. Let's knock it down a number. Yeah. So I want you to look. Shin, Aleph, Cholom, Lamed. Shin, Aleph, Cholom, Lamed. Only the vowel pointings are different. The vowel pointings weren't there until the Masoretic scribes. So that means in the first century, in the Hebrew Tanakh, both the name Saul and the word Sheol were spelled exactly the same in Hebrew. Now what is Sheol? Well, it's translated the grave, hell, pit. Hell has no business being mentioned in connection with either the Hebrew scriptures or the Greek scriptures, because it comes from the Norse pantheon. Hel is the Norse goddess of the underworld. What the hell does that have to do with Hebrew scripture or Christian scripture, I ask you? So in Hebrew it's Sheol, but in Greek it's translated Hades. Now Hades at least has something to do with Greek mythology, but Sheol in Hebrew is the grave or the pit, the underworld. Some I think translate it the world of the dead as if a subterranean retreat, including its accessories and inmates. Let me see if I could show all of this. Here it says, for some reason it says palace of inquiry, but it's place of inquiry. Supposedly a reference to necromancy. Let's see. The place whither men descend at death, the underworld. Anyway, it seems to be kind of a poetic word, and I'm beginning over the years to be suspicious that it's even considered a place in Judaism, or at least in the Hebrew Tanakh, the way it's used, because they don't even talk about it in Judaism today. In fact, Gehinnom seems to get mentioned more as a place in Talmudic Judaism, the Judaism of around the period of the 1st century, but you don't really see Sheol get mentioned much as a place. Nevertheless, this word gets translated as grave, the pit, the underworld, place of no return, where there is no praise of God. Wicked are sent there for punishment. The righteous are not abandoned to it, so it's not a trap that the righteous fall into. And of the place of exile. That's an important point too. So Sheol is used also as a poetic, figurative term for the diaspora, the non-Jewish world. So it's kind of fitting that word is spelled exactly the same as Shaul, or Saul of Tarsus, because that's supposed to be his territory as the apostle to the Gentiles. And as a place of extreme degradation and sin. So, one, Sheol is a place of no return. It's the abode of the dead. You could say it's the abode of the spiritually dead, where there is no praise of God. The wicked are sent there for punishment. The righteous don't fall into that trap. It's a place of exile in the diaspora and of extreme degradation and sin. All these things describe the ministry of the Apostle Paul, as compared to the pro-Torah ministry, at least the way it's presented in the Gospels, of Jesus and the 12 apostles. So, I mean, I'll give it that much, at least. Jesus and the 12 apostles are presented as being at least somewhat pro-Torah, but if you read Paul's writings, that guy is so anti-Torah. and that was his reputation in Jerusalem, as Acts confesses, admits. It tries to apologize for it and explain it away, but it has to. The writers of the book of Acts had to tackle the fact that was Paul's reputation at the time. And it continued being his reputation with the Ebionites. Who were the Ebionites? The Ebionites were pro-Torah. They didn't believe that Paul was an apostle. They didn't have as much of the New Testament as most Pauline Christians did, because they rejected Paul's epistles, of course. I think they were supposed to have had a different version of the book of Matthew, but this is according to Christian sources. Who we know the Evyonim were, because we now have scripture that proves it, is that at least some of the Dead Sea Scrolls community were known as the Evyonim, and whereas the Catholic Encyclopedia says that, quotes, I'm not sure if it was Athanasius maybe not Athanasius, but one of the early church fathers said that the Ebionites were named after their leader, Ebion. And when I read that, I laughed at the time because it seemed so ignorant, because I knew that the Hebrew word Evionim means the poor. So, you know, to think that Ebionites, the word, came from the leader, from the name of their leader, rather than from the Hebrew word meaning the poor, it just struck me as ignorant. Well, you know what? The Catholics were right, but they didn't know where to find the proof of that opinion. Well, Robert Eisenman knew, because he was studying the Dead Sea Scrolls, and he saw that the Dead Sea Scrolls community, at least in places, their leader was referred to as the Ha'evion, the poor one. So literally that was what their leader was called, Evion. So lo and behold, the church fathers were right. The Ebionites, the Evionim of the Dead Sea Scrolls community, had a leader who was called the Evion, and that's where they got their name. So there was this, without any Christian trappings, we see the Evionim who were pro-Torah, who were anti-Paul, certainly, because Paul would have been anti-Torah, and they existed around the time of the first century. And we've got scriptures to show that they existed in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So, and they did not believe that Paul was an apostle. And they were far closer to being faithful to the Torah than Pauline Christianity was. Anyway, so here we've got Saul and Sheol spelled exactly the same. And we can even find a place where this Hebrew wordplay was used in one of the Psalms, I think it was. But I may have a little difficulty finding it quickly. No, here it is, right here. That's how fast I could find it, people. You know, because it's been like about 30 years. Let me think. That was the late 90s. It's now 2024. Okay, so like 26 years that I've known this. And this is David, right? We'll go to the top. A psalm of David, the servant of the Lord, who addressed the words of this song to the Lord on the day when the Lord delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. So, and unfortunately, I don't see, I think it just starts at verse 1. Oh no, we can just go to the interlinear on this one, and the words, this song on the day that the Lord delivered him from the hand of all his enemies, so that's a different word than Satan's, and from the hand of Saul, Shin, Aleph, Chalom, Lamed. So we see that Saul, King Saul, is spelled Shin, Aleph, Chalom, Lamed. Now, if we go down to verse 5, it says, the cords of Sheol surrounded me. And it's spelled Shin, Aleph, Chalom, Lamed. So, either he meant King Saul there, but it's been translated Sheol instead, or it's using a Hebrew wordplay to refer to both King Saul and Sheol, the place of the dead, in the same passage. So the Christian apostle, what's the word? There's some word that is used to I forgot the word. Anyway, Paul's like the hero of Christianity. He's like the best apostle because, like, he brought forth the true revelation of Jesus, blah blah blah, even though he never met him in person, and even though the apostles that Jesus is supposed to have chose never really embraced the guy. You know, like when James received Paul brought some money that he had collected, and he was supposed to give it to the Jerusalem poor, the Evyonim, but then James spun it on him, and he instructed him to use that money so that a couple of men could fulfill their Nazirite vows, which a Nazirite vow is a vow in the Torah, right? So he basically undermined Paul's message by getting that hypocrite to spend the money that he meant to use for the poor instead to help a couple of Jewish men fulfill a vow of the Torah. And then Paul went back to his mission, you know. He didn't really get what he was looking for when he came to Jerusalem. So, and we still to this day know that the Evyonim didn't accept him as a true apostle. Now that was one of my first steps, right? It first became clear to me that Paul was not a true apostle. And then, of course, I was warned that, if you reject Paul, well, then you're going to reject Jesus. Well, yeah, that did eventually happen, but it took a while before I got the evidence, I needed. You know what? I mean, in one respect, it didn't take that long, in that I did a study. I decided, you know what, I've got all these ideas in my head, and I'm allowing some ideas I've accepted to color other ideas in my head. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all my beliefs, I'm just going to put them on a shelf. I can retrieve them later, but I'm going to put them on a shelf, and I'm going to read the Bible chronologically. I'm going to read the books critically. I'm going to make notes whenever I have a question about what I'm reading. and I'm not going to let what comes later change my understanding of what came before, as far as contradicting it. If it comes later and it contradicts it, then I'm going to throw it out. Well, I wasn't very far into the book of Exodus before I knew that Christianity was an anti-Torah fraud perpetrated on people who weren't versed in the Torah. And it was then that Jesus' Messiah ceased to be real for me. But it wasn't until quite a bit later, like maybe 2009, I think, or 2010, that I had finally read Caesar's Messiah, and it all fell into place, because I had I was fairly fluent in the Gospels. I'd read all sorts of extra biblical literature in addition to the Bible. I'd read the early church fathers. I, had experience with Messianic Judaism. I learned quite a bit from different intense denominations. I had been reading Flavius Josephus critically, and so that once I read Caesar's Messiah, I already had the groundwork I needed to see the Caesar's Messiah thesis, otherwise known as, I think, the Flavian hypothesis, as presented by Cliff Carrington, which may not be exactly the same as the Caesar's Messiah thesis, but it's certainly supportive of it and provides helpful information. But it was then that I saw that, Jesus just he's not the Messiah. But then there are other reasons aside from the historical reasons, and those are the ones outlined by Maimonides, undoubtedly drawing from the scriptural examples of messiahs. And it's just that Jesus didn't fulfill the requirements of the eschatological Messiah, or even of a Messiah, unless it's in the sense that Cyrus the Great of Persia, as a Gentile, was a man for the time. Maybe you could say, well, Jesus was the man for the time at that time, but the historical reality is that Jesus is a literary mask or disguise for Titus Flavius, who destroyed the temple and exterminated Jews and sacked Jerusalem and created this Christian myth, this idolatry that has inoculated non-Jewish people against anything good that Judaism might have to offer them. Furthermore, the fact that Christianity came into existence allowed Islam to be derived from it. So now all the evil that Islam brings to the world, at least in its most extreme forms, is due to the fact that Christianity was invented by men who had made it their campaign to kill Jews. So, what a surprise then that Christianity has a history of killing Jews, and that Islam derived from Christianity has a history of killing Jews, because these two world religions are designed to inoculate non-Jews against giving Jews the simple human benefit of the doubt that any human being would give another human being. So I've shown you in this video that Gentiles, Christians, have capitalized upon mundane concepts in the Hebrew scriptures, blown them up, turned them into this Christian mythology that biases people, prejudices them, misinforms them, disinforms them against what these terms mean in the Hebrew scriptures, and dare I say, poisons what could be a better informed worldview of Jewish religion and the faith that Gentiles had in great numbers before the Romans destroyed the temple.